Hello and welcome back to the Indian Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Raj Balkaran, and you're looking for living wisdom from ancient India that you might be able to apply in your own life. Now, one of the questions or sort of areas of inquiry that come up often in teaching is the theme of decapitation. Ganesha has an elephant head. He didn't always. He has an elephant head because his original head was decapitated. More on that from last week's podcast episode. The great goddess Durga Kali, decapitation galore. Yeah. Kali in the Devi Mahatmya is described as being birthed from the wrath of Durga, from her third eye, from her scowl, because demonic forces are trying to assault her, drag her by her hair, and make her the wife of their overlord. And so she's unimpressed. And from her third eye, from her scowl, emerges Kali, gruesome, terrifying. And one of the descriptions is that she is wearing a garland of skulls. What does this mean? What's with all the decapitation? So I was on the A Grateful Life podcast the other day. I think that'll be out soon. And one of the stories that the delightful host wanted to hear involved decapitation. And I described it on that podcast in a way that I describe it in a number of my courses. I call it divine decapitation. Not just because it is decapitation on behalf of the divine, Shiva is decapitating someone, the goddess is decapitating someone, etc., 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 because it is a divine function. The decapitation, in many ways, of the head is emblematic of, representative of, the surrendering of the ego sense. So the head is very much representative of who we are. Well, because our face is what makes us unique. I mean, our entire body is unique, of course, but the vast majority of attention, depending on our vocation, perhaps, but the vast majority of attention that we receive is on our face, and it's how we are recognized. It is both the means of others recognizing who we are. It is also the means of we expressing how we feel, sometimes even what we think, a furrowed brow and all that. It is also a home of the senses, right? Key senses such as smell, taste, sight, hearing, right? And so it is very much our interface with the world. Our ego sense is very much tied up into our face, both our own sense of our ego sense and also the ways in which we project that ego or persona out into the world. So the face or the head is crucial, and not just the prima facie face, but, in our noggin, in our brain, our functioning, our computing, our recollecting, our reminiscing, right? Experiences recorded in memory, etc. So who we are is very much tied up into our head. And oftentimes we are very much in our head about who we are. And Indian wisdom teachings teach that who we are is much deeper than in our head. It's actually in our heart, where the light of the soul abides. And so the mythic motifs, the vignettes where we see the motif of divine decapitation occur at moments of great insolence or ignorance. Shiva famously decapitates Daksha, his father-in-law, because his father-in-law was so insolent and ignorant to his own daughter, Shiva's wife Sati, that Sati immolates herself. This, of course, was in a previous episode as well. So the wrath is a response to ignorance. Durga's wrath manifesting Kali is because the demons have the audacity not only to not recognize her as the mother of the world, as the mother, they literally commodify her as a jewel among women and objectify her, and then have the audacity to insist that either she choose willingly to be the concubine, the wife, if you will, the consort of their demon overlord, or be forcibly dragged by her hair. Wonderful choice, right? It's fascinating that in this ancient Indic text, approximately 15 centuries old, in, of course, a patriarchal society, I mean, the entire known world was patriarchal, we nevertheless have these moments of glaring, even feminist insight, or at least egalitarian insight, insofar as, hey, what do you not recognize the divinity of the feminine? Do you not recognize the Divine Mother? They don't. And when ignorance is so thick, what option does one have? How do you slice through tamas without rajas? How do you slice through darkness, inertia, without a bit of fire? So there's always a great deal of ignorance involved when divine decapitation occurs. This is why the decapitation is not destructive pain. In a sense, it's constructive pain. The people being decapitated, such as Ganesha and Daksha, they end up seeing through divine sight, or seeing through a higher octave of their ego sense, more sublimated sense of self, where their ego's out of the way and they can see more clearly. And even in the case of the demons that are destroyed by the goddess on the battlefield, this great hymn in chapter 4 of the Devi Mahatmya, the Chakradi Stuti, glorious hymn, describes them as going to heaven. She liberates them. She pulverizes them on the battlefield, and nevertheless, they're liberated by her divine grace, having contact with the divine itself. And so, divine decapitation, it is divine not because it is enacted by a divine figure, but because it is performing the divine function of allowing the decapitated to wake up and grow another head, if you will. It's fascinating. And this usually ensues from wrath. But the wrath is not wanton, right? Durga doesn't wake up angry or go to bed angry. She's composed and beautiful, and she's Saumya. She's lovely to behold, but in response to ignorance, more often than not in protection of the imperiled. Righteous wrath ensues. Ahimsa, ahimsa, ahimsa. Indeed, the sages vow ahimsa. But who but Rama protects the sages? Who but the Kshatriyas? Who but the warriors protect the sages so they're not skinned alive? There's a time for war. There's a time for peace. Such is the ebb and flow of the human experience, indeed. But the wrath needs to be righteous. It has to be with cause, for purpose, and measured. Not wanton, not like a fire which is never fed enough, ablaze and destroying everything in its path, right? And so the story I tell today is a story of Bhairava, a wrathful form of Shiva, very, very powerful devata. There's a lot of lore and a lot of practices around the deity Bhairava as a fierce form of Lord Shiva, who himself is a destroyer god. Okay, so to set the stage, we have to talk about three very important cosmic or cosmogonic functions: the function of creation, preservation, and destruction. Now, reuse, reduce, recycle. We have a very eco-friendly worldview here, in that destruction is not the end, it's not a whole bunch of debris. Actually, everything gets dissolved into the primordial ocean. Why? So that it can all be created anew. And this happens over and over and over and over and over and over again ad infinitum. There is no beginning. There is no end. There is only the genesis of one thing. And when you pay careful attention in life, every time something is created, it means something else was destroyed. What do you mean? Well, how many things had to be destroyed to create your meal today? What about the arrival of a lovely child, perhaps your first? Well, your bachelor days are over. Honeymoon's over, as it were. If you pay careful attention, all jokes aside, you'll notice that whenever something emerges, nothing emerges ex nihilo, out of nothing. This is not possible in our realm. Everything emerges on the backs of something else. And if you pay careful attention, you'll see that nothing dissolves into nothing. That everything that comes to an end gives rise to something else. This can be true of a phase of life. This can be true of, oh my goodness, I lost my job. My job came to an end. Well, this is the beginning of perhaps a more dynamic, open, and fruitful line of work for you. It depends on your mentality. If you're attached to the illusion of concrete existence, then sarvam dukkham, all is suffering indeed. If you understand that all things are in flux, if you understand that we are expressions of karmic ripening, if you will, and that the ripening is dynamic, not static. The apple that falls and is decomposed is nothing more than fodder for new fruit. The fruit that spawned from the tree is nothing more than resulting from that which is decayed, has been decayed. This dynamic thinking will quite serve you in life, actually. So there are these three functions: creation, preservation, destruction. And these three functions are personified by and carried out by the three deities that are part of the Trimurti. Okay, Brahma, the creator, grandfather of time, if you will, four-headed, bearded. He's created, so he's just hanging out. He gives the odd boon here and there. And, Vishnu, the preserver, now he's got the lion's share of the work in a sense, because he's got to tend to the garden. He doesn't just plant the seed. He doesn't just rake it up when it's all done. He has to tend to the garden age after age. Whenever there's an issue, there's a demon trying to steal the elixir of life, he turns himself into Mohini, the enchantress. We need help churning the ocean for the elixir of life, he turns himself into Kurma Vatara, the tortoise. Literally on Vishnu's back, the churning occurs. He incarnates in flesh as Rama, as Krishna, etc., etc. So his role is preservation. Okay, Shiva's role is destruction. Now, I think of destruction very much as transformation because of what was mentioned earlier. Destruction in the Indic context is understood consciously and unconsciously as a means of transformation. Destruction in an Abrahamic context is understood consciously or unconsciously as an end, because the white noise of Abrahamic thought is this Genesis, we're in the middle somewhere, and then the end of days is the apocalypse is nigh type thing. This is a prevalent idea, but it's a very different backdrop than we see in Indic thought. And so destruction really is transformation, because nothing is ultimately destroyed. So Shiva is a great transformer. This is why he is used, he is drawn upon in tantric thought. Tantra has to do with sacred transformation. Okay. So there's Brahma, the creator, there's Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer or transformer. Okay. The Trimurti collectively. But here's a question for you kids. I mean not to infantilize you. I use this term even for people who are 20 years older than me. Anyhow, the question is this: which of these divinities is the greatest of all? Which of their functions most important? In fact, who among them possesses the most power? Who's most powerful among the Trimurti, among Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, or Shiva, the transformer? So they're actually hanging out in some loka, in some realm, and they're having this conversation. They're kind of hashing this out there, So Brahma says, surely as the creator of all things, I am the greatest of all, said Lord Brahma. Were it not for me, nothing at all would exist. Therefore, it cannot be doubted that I wield the greatest of cosmic powers. Vishnu responds, so it is, Lord Brahma, you are the creator of all things. But once you have withdrawn from creation and retired to your meditation, it is I who must ensue to ensure the universe's upkeep, preserving it eon after eon. I'm forever incarnating in this or that form just to prevent events on the earth plane from spiraling out of control. Without my tortoise incarnation, the demons and gods would never have procured the elixir of immortality. Without my incarnation as Krishna, the great Mahabharata war could not have been won, and evil would have prevailed upon the earth. Therefore, my cosmic role as preserver is clearly greater than yours, Lord Brahma. Then Shiva the destroyer, Lord of Yogis, spoke thus. Creation and preservation do indeed both require great power, my lords. Yet consider that once you, Brahma, have created the universe and withdrawn from it, and while you, Vishnu, toil to maintain it, I engage in meditation and tapasya for as long as the universe persists, amassing extraordinary yogic power. With this power, I shall annihilate the cosmos at the end of time. All your creations will expire, and all attempts at preservation ultimately fail. I surely possess more power than the cosmos itself. How else could I be capable of destroying it otherwise? At the end of the age, I alone will remain, so it must be in order for Brahma to be born anew at the dawn of the next. Truly, there could be no question of which of us wields the most power. Vishnu was humbled and recognized the greatness of Shiva. He contentedly conceded. It stands to reason that you do indeed wield the greatest power, the power to annihilate all things garnered through extraordinary yogic practice. Glory to Shiva, Lord of Yogis. But Brahma was proud of his creation, and he grew agitated by Shiva's, words to him unsavory. He's a little bit triggered. Do neither of you realize that I am grandfather of all creation? What would exist without my creative power? Shiva, you think you are powerful. Without me, you are nothing but an unwashed, reclusive, self-absorbed ascetic. We may each have 5 heads, but my divine eyes see clearly, while yours appear to be clouded with ceremonial ash. This is a time when Brahma actually had 5 heads, not 4. Vishnu gasped. He would not dare to insult Shiva in such a manner, knowing full well the danger that Shiva's terrible anger could pose. But boastful Brahma had kindled the destroyer's wrath. The cosmos quaked and grew black as ink as Shiva's fury grew. Shiva himself grew dark and scowled. He tore a shred from his fingernail and tossed it on the earth as he uttered an ominous mantra. The cosmos quaked and roared and thundered with the power of his incantation. From that fingernail grew a fearsome warrior named Bhairava, an embodiment of Shiva's supreme wrath. Bhairava's bare indigo skin proclaimed his intensity and strength. Fearsome fangs protruded from his face. One of his 4 hands was empty, but in the others he carried a scythe, a trident, and a noose. Before Brahma could utter another insolent word, Bhairava, ablaze with Shiva's outrage, lunged with terrifying speed and severed the 5th head of Brahma, which had uttered the insult. Bhairava carries Brahma's decapitated skull in his 4th hand to this day. Upon decapitation, the creator immediately realized the error of his arrogance. Humbled by the ordeal and purified by Shiva's punishment, pedagogical punishment, right? Brahma recognized the supremacy of Shiva's colossal power. He exclaimed with all 4 of his remaining heads, facing all 4 cardinal directions, glory to Shiva, great destroyer, hail Shiva, great God, Lord of Yogis. Victory to Bhairava, Shiva's fearsome wrath. Now here's a bit of that was the rendition is commonly the case on this podcast from the stories behind the poses. Here is what I call the spiritual gloss, or the emotional, social, spiritual commentary on the tale. Bhairava represents the most formidable, destructive aspect of Shiva. He is fearless and fearsome. He represents the courage and force required to combat toxic ego, whether within or without. The arrogance to be found in the creator mirrors that found throughout his creation. This egoistic aspect found in self and others thwarts divine aspirations and curtails divine consciousness. It must be combated for yogic power to be recognized and realized. It is the ego that sees destruction as an ending, as a negative thing. The soul sees destruction of material obstructions as the great spiritual blessing it is, a blessing bestowed by Shiva. One of the metaphors that came to mind is, I think it was either in a client college, one-on-one spiritual guidance work, it might have been in a tutorial, but the idea that, the light of the soul, right? The soul is luminous. It casts light with respect to spiritual light, seeing power. And any object before the light casts a shadow. And so the ego, the ahankara, the I sense, or the mind, if you will, it is an object which casts a shadow. The stronger the ego sense, whether we're using it for self-aggrandizement or self-effacing, it's still a pretty strong ego. The stronger the ego sense, the larger an object it is, as it were, the larger shadow it casts. And who knows what lies in the darkness, what ghouls and goblins creep in our unconscious, what desires, fantasies, entities. And so the way to work with this complex is to honor and respect and venture into the shadow. Shadow is greatest of gurus if we allow it to be, if we're made of the right stuff, if we are proper students, disciples, shishas. Otherwise, shadow is a wretched taskmaster indeed. Anyhow, let me continue with the divine gloss. Look, I'm sharing a gloss on the gloss. My goodness. How many footnotes do we have here? We feel the power of divine decapitation in Bhairavasana as we submit our own heads in this pose. It reminds us of Brahma's arrogance and subsequent humility, his transformation from the darkness of ego to the light of divine consciousness. Once decapitated, Brahma is purified of toxic, blinding ego and rid of attachments and obstructions to the realization of divinity. See, similar with Ganesha, he realizes divinity. Before that, Ganesha didn't know who this man was. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then listen to the story about Ganesha getting his head. And sometimes the demons don't learn. Daksha ends up learning. So he gets a new head, the head of a goat. Ganesha gets the head of an elephant. Luckily, Brahma has four others, So strive to remember this tale and realize its wisdom when you assume Bhairavasana. But whether or not you do asanas and whether or not you do Bhairavasanas, life is nothing more than an elaborate and complex yoga mat. And you are pushed and pulled and bent into shape and out of shape at every turn, pending your constitution and your circumstance. If you're lucky, you can assume Shavasana or at least warrior pose. But remember this tale when you engage the yoga class of life. Remember that there is a time for extraordinary energetic force that Bhairava represents in order to combat the thickest of sludge, the greatest of demons, the darkest of shadows. I hope you enjoy that tale a fraction and amsha as much as its teller enjoyed sharing it with you. And I hope that the living wisdom with which it was imbued is of use to you in your journey, if for nothing else and for your sheer entertainment. Keep well until next time, and feel free to reach out if I may be of service. Namaste.